Welcome to the most famous BCAL bug and how to fix it. Hey, I'm Eric, and the topic for today's video is an error message that has in many incarnations been shown to countless users for decades. Let me actually get right into it because that's much easier. So here's the error. Right now it says the changes to the customer record cannot be saved because some information on the page is not up to date. Close the page, reopen it, and try again. Yeah, so if a user gets an error like that, what would they do? They would probably close the page, open it again, and try again. And maybe they will succeed, maybe not. This error has had many different ways the message has changed over years. For a long time it said that the definition of this record has changed since it was last retrieved from the database or something like that. A more technical version. We have seen a couple of iterations where it's something about this, where close the page and open it again. But my guess is that because I have done stuff where this error was shown multiple times, so I guess you have too. And if not, good for you. But let's talk about how this error can actually come. So here it is again. The changes to the customer record cannot be saved. So what did I do? Well, in this case, I ran a function here. It's not a vanilla plain function. No, this is a fancy function. So this does a lot of stuff. And I run it and I get this error. And I can hit a 5 or do anything like that, and no matter what, I get the same error again. So let's take a look at the code. I think I have it somewhere here. Let's make it big so we can see it. That we have, we have added an action to the page, and this action calls the fancy function, passes reg, and then it says sets name to be Eric, and then modifies the reg. So let's run this with the debugger on and see what happens. So I will hit the fancy function again, and we do get a break, so that's pretty good. And we get the break on the modify, so the modify fails. And if I remove the fancy function here and run again, it works. So I guess if we, it's hidden behind my head. Anyway, trust me, the name 2 now has the value Eric. So clearly it's because we're calling the fancy function we get this error. So let's look at the fancy function. Well, the fancy function is quite simple. We pass the variable as a parameter, the customer rec, and then we set the name 2 to fancy Eric, and we modify it. And now you can see that, so I have 2 modifiers. So what is going on? Well, let me explain what is actually going on. Because we call fancy function. We pass rec into this, so rec is now cost in here. We modify this, and then we exit again. The problem here is that in this case, we can always discuss if we need 2 modifiers, but quite often if this occurs when you're calling something and then you're triggering a validate, and lots of stuff happens that may be out of your control. But the main problem here is that because I passed rec as a non by ref variable. I just passed it as cost. Cost is actually now a copy of rec. So when we pass something like that, so we and this is where Business Central and AL is truly weird, because depending on what type is behind the scene, whether you need to use var or not, is that there's no rule. Actually, I could say that there is a rule stating that if the data type is old, then you need to make sure you use var. If data type is new, like a dictionary or JSON and stuff like that, then it's actually still a .NET object behind the scene, and it behaves differently. So you don't get a copy of the object. But in this case, if I pass var, let's just try it here. If I pass var, if I pass the variable by reference using the var thing, then I don't get the error. So what's happening here is that if we do this, then we get down here, we modify the rec, so what's in the database is now Fancy Eric. But then we get back up here where name2 is still containing the original value. So imagine that the code looked like this. Wow. When we get back here, even though we have done this, because this is a copy variable, then rec will still contain the original value. So when Business Central goes to modify this, it will discover that, hey, this record has been modified since it was retrieved from the database. So actually the old wording was very correct, but probably not very user-friendly. And I don't think the new messaging is user-friendly either, but that at least work in the scenario where two users are trying to edit the same record at the same time in a UI, and they get that error. But now we're modifying it, and it looks say, hey, whatever, when I got rec, that's no longer what's in the database, so we throw that error. Where this gets complicated is, of course, that this can be buried deep, that you're calling something that's calling something that's calling something, that's doing a modify, and then back up the call tree and something else happens and you're doing another modify. So quite often, and the problem here, right, we got the error on line 23, but the offending line where the bug was on line 28. We could do a we could do a rec dot. See, let's go back. Yeah, it's right. So if we do a rec dot find equal, meaning re-get the same record. So now if we run this, let's just see that we don't get an error. We don't get an error because it works now. So what happened here? So let me actually explain this one. So find with an equal sign is the same as a get. So I could also have done rec.get and then rec.number, customer number. But a find with an equal just uses the values that are already in the primary key fields in the record. So it is a get, even though it's called find, but it's a re-get of the current primary key. So sometimes this is what's necessary if in this case the not passed by var and the modified deep down is not in your code. It's something that's beyond your control. But again, the problem is that you will get this error not in the offending line. That the debugger will never tell you where the error is. The debugger will just tell you the second modifier that breaks this. So you have to go dig, and I have, I've spent hours sometimes trying to locate what happens, because something was calling something. It was, big system with lots of moving pieces, and depending on things, it might not happen, because then suddenly, something triggered something. So, and I have been chasing this bug for, I don't know, close to 30 years, because this is very common. With whatever disguise, whatever messaging Microsoft thinks is appropriate right now to try to explain what's happened. So at this point, it's the message we saw. Tomorrow it might be a different message. Anyway, that's the most famous bug, AL bug I know. If you know a different bug that you think that's more famous, I want to know in the comments below. Maybe I'll create a video on those bugs. Otherwise, this video is for you. Go check it out. Great AL code there. Perhaps even with bugs or without bugs. You never know. Check it out. See you there. Bye.